Hi everyone, thanks for watching LaurieWired, and in this video we're going to be looking at how we can introduce the concept of loop statements inside of our ARM assembly. So we're going to be using the branch and compare operators that we've used in previous videos, but we're going to be taking these and using them to actually repeat different segments of code to effectively form our equivalent C-style loops. So I'll show you the equivalent C code as well as the corresponding assembly code that will do effectively the same thing. So let's get right into it. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create some example C code here. And it's just going to be really silly code. All I'm going to do is int I equals 0. And we're just going to have a very straightforward while loop that's just going to go through and increment the value of I as we go. I'm going to do while I, which is going to be my counter or flag variable, while I is less than 5. All I want to do is just increment the value of I by 1. So I++. It's a really simple while loop. Really looks nice in our C code. So let's see if we can take this and we can translate this to some equivalent assembly code. I'm going to go over to my CPULator. And the first thing that we need to do is we have to have the equivalent value or flag variable to equate to our I variable. So I'm going to pick on the register R0, and I'm going to move the immediate value 0 into our R0, and this is going to be our counter variable. So let's do move R0, and then the immediate value 0. So this is already set to 0, but if this was a real program, you might not know that at that time. So we definitely want to make sure that our R0 is actually zeroed out. And now we want to go on and we have our flag variable, but we want to check out this comparison right here. So what we're wanting to do is increment the value of I if I is less than 5. So that means if I is greater than or equal to 5, we actually want to get out and go to the end of this. So what we can do is we can compare with our compare operator that we've previously used, CMP R0, with the immediate value 5. And remember, if it's greater than or equal to 5, we don't want to actually go through this loop again. So in ARM assembly, we can just use our branching statement. And if we go back to our conditional execution mnemonic extensions, we can actually see we have an option for greater than or equal. So we can just do branch greater than or equal, and then we can go to the actual end of the program. So I'm going to do just that. So branch greater than or equal. And remember, this takes a label, which is just pointing to a certain location in memory as the actual argument. So we're going to have to create a label that is the end of our program. I'm just going to call this end. And let me go down here and actually make my label end. And I'm just going to put some example code in here. It's not in my actual C code, but I just want to show that this is the actual end of the program and that we didn't go back through our loop. So I'm just going to do move. We'll just pick on R1 and put maybe the immediate value 2 into that register once we've successfully completed our loop. So now we have our comparison. If R0 is greater than or equal to 5, we're going to jump to the end. But if it's not, we actually want to do our addition. So we're going to want to increment our I value, or in this case our R0 register, by 1. So we can just use the add instruction here. So add R0, then the immediate value 1, if it was not less than the immediate value 5. Now this is going to go through and execute sequentially. So we'd have our 0 value in R0, our comparison, our branching statement to the end, which is not going to be taken the first time. And then we have our add value, but this is just going to leave the value 1 inside of our R0 register, and then continue on sequentially. It's going to go through and execute moving 2 into R1, but it's not actually doing our loop. So now we actually need an additional branching statement to repeat this little portion of code here to create our actual loop. So after we've done our add, we're just going to do an absolute or unconditional branch, which is just going to be B and then it's going to take another label name. So if you remember, our unconditional branch can be BAL, or you can just leave it as B, which I like to do. And then what we want to do is we actually want to branch to the beginning portion of this code. So we're going to need another label to actually point to this location inside of our code. So I'm going to call this loop, and this is just another label. So we're just going to go branch back to loop, and then the portion of code or the instruction that's going to break us out of this loop is going to be this branch greater than or equal. After we've incremented the value of R0 enough, then it's going to branch greater than or equal and jump us to this end, and we're not going to loop anymore. So let's just compile and load this and see what that looks like when it's running. So we have our initial counter that we're going to step over. Our initial comparison, but R0 is not greater than or equal to 5. So this is not going to move us over to our end label. So let me keep going over. Then it's going to add 1 to our R0 register. So we've started our loop, and now we're going to jump back over to the portion of code that is pointed to by this loop label right here. And we're going to keep on executing this. But R0 is still not greater than or equal to 5, so we're going to do another branch. And you can see we're incrementing our value R0. So let's just keep going. I'm going to go a little faster here. Hopefully you get the point. You see our value is increasing, getting to the value 4. And so now we're at 5, and we're back to the top where our comparison and branch statements are. So we're comparing R0, which is currently 5, to the immediate value 5, and if it is greater than or equal, so if R0 is greater than or equal to 5, which it is, it's going to jump us over to this end tag, and we're going to skip this additional add and branch instruction, so we have effectively completed our program. So let's watch that, and here we go. We'll execute the last instruction. And now we've successfully got that closing value 2 put into the register R1, and we have the value 5 stored into our counter variable, which is going to be R0. And if you were looking at the equivalent C code, this would do exactly the same thing. So we have successfully translated our C code over here with our whole while loop over to our ARM assembly language right here. So thanks so much for watching LaurieWired, everyone. In this video, we saw how we could introduce the concept of loop statements inside of our ARM assembly. We used our compare and branch instructions to repeat these certain portions of code that we were trying to use, in this case to actually increment one single variable, and just really simply show how we could start to create these loop statements. So thanks so much for watching LaurieWired, everyone, and I'll catch you in the next video. Maybe I shouldn't have put them on hard. Here we go. Yeah! Excellent music in this.